Hey everyone, I want to ask the question today, are we in a generational buying opportunity for Bitcoin, how to define it, and give you a sneak peek into my secret spreadsheet as to where I'm buying and what metrics I use exactly as to what defines a buying opportunity of a lifetime for Bitcoin. I'm absolutely sure that you'll get some good insight and hopefully give you a really nice big picture perspective on Bitcoin today. If you like the video, like, share, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with all the videos. Without further ado, let's crack on. Before we get into the video, quick 15-second update on Bitcoin, which is breaking that $24,500 level at the moment, is basically likely going to result in a move up to $28,000 in my opinion. We have no volume at these levels between 28,000 and 24,000, and as we're showing some momentum to the upside, I expect us to fill this price pretty quickly sometime in the next week or two, would be my analysis of the situation. So that's what I would be expecting. In validation below that is going to be, 22.4 thousand. If we break below that, then maybe it opens the door for lower prices, but still on course for 28k. Now, I'm going to share with you my personal definitions and metrics for a generational buying opportunity for Bitcoin. And what I mean by that, firstly, is opportunity to buy Bitcoin at really low suppressed levels when there's typically a lot of bad sentiment and fear in the market. That usually is the period of time to buy when prices are low before prices really appreciate and then usually move on to new all-time highs, or usually make like hundreds of percentages multiples in increases in price. So that's what we mean by generational buying opportunity, and they typically usually come every 1, 3, 4 years even. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for to define that. Now, the metrics that I use are obviously purely ones that I use for my own personal buying strategy and from my own personal experience, which has served me well in the past, and also using obviously past historical data to help me predict what is going to happen in the future, which is essentially what technical analysis is. And these 5 metrics are moving averages, RSI, 4-year cycle, looking at the dollar strength index, and horizontal support, and we'll go through each of them. And what we really are looking for is for pretty much all of these boxes to be ticked, or most of them to be ticked, to really give us that high confidence of whether we are in a generational buying opportunity for Bitcoin. Some of these concepts I've spoken about before in like tutorial videos or in some of my previous videos. You will realize that, and that's the reason that I basically lean on them, is because they're highly reliable pieces of data that only happen at a few moments in time, and when they do happen, they usually trigger really important cycles for Bitcoin, and in this case really defining that bottom of the bear market. So if we just take a look at the moving averages, I always speak about the 200-week, the 21-week EMA, and the 200-day moving average. Okay, and this is what I mean by these 3 key metrics. Okay, so for Bitcoin, I always look at the 200-day moving average, and I try to get this concept across, is that whenever we touch the 200-day moving average, okay, right, it doesn't have to mean that we are necessarily hitting it straight away and then have a perfect bounce. It's basically that area of value to be buying into, and I've just highlighted here this red line and these yellow dots is where the touch points of the 200-week moving averages. So we can say that we've basically hit that on Bitcoin for a 4th time. Okay, and every time we hit that, we typically start to form or are close to a bottom. Now, the other one that I also look at is the 200-day moving average, okay, and how far we are from the 200-day moving average. And what is really key about this is, like I just mentioned on that spreadsheet, is that whenever we are 50% or more below the 200-day moving average, it typically coincides with that period of being a generational buying opportunity. Not 42%, not 30%, 50% or more. Okay, and you can see that in the past, whenever we've had like 30%, 45%, it hasn't quite cut the mustard. But every single time that we've basically moved 50 to 60%, okay, 50% or more for me would be the criteria. You can see that has resulted in massive buying opportunities for Bitcoin. You can see that's happened 3 times in the past. Once in 2014, 2018, and March 2020, and currently we are also exactly at that point where we basically dropped 50%, 55% below the 200-day moving average as a key indicator. And the last criteria that we want to justify is moving anywhere around the 50% level below the 21-week moving average, which is our key long-term momentum indicator. And every time that we have done that, again, 55% back in 2018, March COVID low, another 55%. And the bottom of the bear market that we got in January 2015 was again about 55-60%. And currently that level that we dropped down to the bottom, you can see that again we're at about that 50% level, which is really, really important. So again, this is in confluence with some of those moving average indicators. So I'm going to go ahead and tick these 3 boxes because these are the 3 criteria that I use on long-term moving averages that have been met. The second criteria that I'm looking at is where is the RSI on the high time frames, and can we see some sort of confluence and support? Okay, and I'm looking at that on the weekly and the monthly. So if we just draw this onto the weekly and just bring up the RSI on the bottom, I look for oversold, going deep into the oversold, or delving into the oversold territory, which is 13 below on the RSI, usually results in a great buying opportunity for Bitcoin. You can see that is exactly where we have bottomed out at the moment. We didn't quite get there on the COVID low. We almost got there, because if we had closed that wick, I would imagine a little bit lower, we probably did trigger that at the time, but it didn't print a 30 RSI. But you can see that again, that matches another part of the criteria. Part of the puzzle that I'm looking at is that, is this going to be a really good buying opportunity for the long term? Yes, on the weekly RSI. And also what we can see on the monthly RSI is that we've spoken about this before as well, is that it is not exact hard number like RSI, which is a very specific number, because you can see at the minute the weekly RSI is actually probably at its lowest point that it's ever been. But on the monthly RSI, again, you can see we've got this horizontal support, and that's pretty much where we bounce from, or at least attempting to bounce from. So this is something that is, I guess, in the process, but you can see that we're starting to get some support over here. Okay, and that's at about that 44-43 level, which has coincided in the last 2 bear markets. So we can definitely tick the weekly. The monthly, I'm willing to say let's wait and see, but this is a box that maybe we might be able to tick, in the next like 1, 2 or 3 months, once we start to get a little bit more data in. So this could be, but not quite yet. Now, the third criteria that I use is the 4-year cycle, which I've just corrected my spelling for on this on the screen at the minute. But the reason that this is something that I stick to and really respect is because in the last 4 years and the 4 years previous to that, Bitcoin always follows the cycles of peak highs and peak lows, and gives you really, really defined date ranges, and tells you a good idea of where we might bottom and when we might bottom. So that's why I really like to use the 4-year cycle, as I've spoken about in previous videos. However, I don't put this as the most important indicator, because just through the concept of all models are useful, okay, and some of them are useful, but really all models are wrong eventually, because they can't keep up with price forever. So just something to bear in mind. But the 4-year cycle, I'm looking at 3 things: where the peaks are, where the lows are, and where that is in relation to the halving. Now, if we take this over to the BLX chart and we have a look at the 4-year cycle, you can see that those 3 things that we're looking at is the halving, the peak, and the lows, okay, is that typically you can see that every time we are about 850 days or so from prior to the halving is when we tend to see the peaks. You can see that in 2014, you can see that in 2018, 2020, and you can see that is potentially the case exactly over here as well. So just follow that as I'm going along. You can see that the next halving is going to occur in March 2024, and then 850 days plus or minus, like I said, use that as a guide, okay, not as an exact number. You can see that that peak coincides with November 2021. So we've got that tick, so we can still basically say with a decent degree of confidence that before 2021, okay, that peak is probably going to remain at November 2021, before that next halving hits, basically, okay. And then usually about a year later, 4-year cycle dictates that we tend to see that next low. Now, I've seen some people online dispute what they think is the real high, which was, May 21 or November 21, but I'm going to take the November 21 because that is objectively the price that occurred, okay? And you can see that about a year later, okay, would put us at quarter 4 of this year to potentially see a bottom. Again, that's about November later on this year, which is definitely a potential that I'm looking out for, and I've spoken about that scenario multiple times. So definitely something that could occur. okay? But you know, it is possible again that maybe it's like slightly shifts, and we've had like, you know, maybe this time we don't have quite a year, we have 9 months. So again, like the 4-year cycle is still, you know, following, it's still in play, and you know, as long as it's still in play and it's not invalidated, it's something that I'm going to be following. So if we just go back to our tab, okay, again, I'm going to say that the peaks are still intact with the model, okay, the lows are still potentially there or thereabouts, and the halving, which is in relation to the peak, you know, I think we can check these off as you know, with a high degree of confidence that we've got that there as well. The low, I'm going to wait in the same way that I would wait on the monthly RSI, but you can see that again, we're getting quite a few indicators here for me, in my opinion, that, you know, Bitcoin is in an area of high value for the long term. Now, the DXY is very important in relation to Bitcoin as well, because obviously Bitcoin is usually measured in the US dollar, and everyone talks in Bitcoin in USD nominational valuation terms. So if we just bring it back to Bitcoin and the US dollar, now, if we bring this over to the dollar currency index, what we can see is that previously, whenever the dollar currency index has peaked or has been at very elevated levels or formed some sort of new local high, okay, it typically results in an area of price or a time area in which Bitcoin is able to put in a bottom, and this is usually where all the bottoms are. So if we have a look at 2013, you can see that at the time, we wouldn't have had this price action that we got in 2015 where the dollar moved up to a new higher level, but at the time you could see that there were some signs here where we got a little bit of a double top, and that resulted in a bottom for Bitcoin as prices were depreciating. So you could use that as confluence, and you can see at the end of the next parabolic move was the bottom of the bear market in 2014. You can see this massive move up, okay, and you can see again in COVID 2020, okay, that we've got that over here, another massive spike towards an area of resistance, right? And what have we got currently? We've currently got Bitcoin, okay, making new highs on the dollar, and making new highs and breaking out to new highs on the dollar, multi-year highs. We know that this is an area, okay, when it's going parabolic, that it doesn't necessarily have to come crashing back down, but where we're looking for Bitcoin to form a bottom when the dollar is looking very, very strong and attacking new highs, okay? And you can see that as exactly what we're getting over here. And whilst this might not be the top, I bet that this is probably going to be close to, okay, in my opinion, you know, where the where the top, where the bottom is going to be for Bitcoin. So we can say that you know, the DXY is looking very strong and is at a key new pivotal level. So I would tick that box and say, yeah, you know, the DXY is giving me information that Bitcoin is at a really favorable time to be swapping your dollars for Bitcoin. Now, the last thing that I look at, which is still really important, is market structure and horizontal support for Bitcoin, okay? And what I mean by that is that typically in previous patterns and previous bear markets, we usually see an area of horizontal support, which is then broken. That leads to the accumulation and sideways action before we move back to the upside. And let me show you what I mean by that. And if we move on to Bitcoin on a high time frame level, you can see that the support that we create in every bear market, which is pretty clear to see actually. You can see in 2014 that whenever we attack these levels multiple times, okay, and we form like a floor support, we basically move down below it, form a low, accumulate in this box and move sideways for a period of time, and then move up onto the next level. 2018, exactly the same again. We formed a support level at 6,000, hit that level multiple times, that support becomes weaker, we move below that, accumulate sideways for a period of time, and then move back to the upside. And that's currently still exactly in play at the minute, okay? It's not exactly a descending triangle or, you know, what we saw precisely in the last two bear markets, but the principle is the same. 30,000 has been the floor for the last year and a half, okay? And you can see that once we've broken down below that, we're now just forming or potentially forming that low. And like I said, anytime that we break below a key structural level like that, at the top of a bull market, we tend to find the bottom somewhere below that soon after. So yeah, that's basically what I'm looking for here. And the only question from this level is going to be, is 17,500 the low for Bitcoin, or do we move lower in the later part of the year and maybe we tap into this order block at $14,000, which we've spoken about? So that's definitely a possibility, but we know that whenever we break down below this, this is where we find the generational buying opportunities for Bitcoin. So we go back to our box, we can tick this, and we can say with confidence we've broken that key structural level on the chart. So having a look at my little Excel spreadsheet, what I would say to you is that we are at a high confidence generational buying opportunity for Bitcoin, in my opinion. But just remember, this is not financial advice. This is for me a range that I am going to be buying in. So like I said, I've been buying in at like 19,000, 22,000, 20,000, because it starts to meet and match these criteria. Okay, and when all of these sort of come together and they gave me confluence, okay, in the indicators and what I see, it gives me high confidence for the long term that it's going to be a good place to buy. Of course, we can still go lower from current prices, but remember, when you look back, okay, in that next cycle where Bitcoin, in my opinion, will probably go to 180, 200,000 plus dollars, okay, it's likely that, you know, you want to look back and say, that period of time when Bitcoin was at like $30,000, $25,000, $18,000, whatever that price is, right? That would be considered a generational buying opportunity where you look back and you go, damn, I should have bought Bitcoin at those levels. So that's my take on this cycle's generational buying opportunity. Take what you want from this data as you wish. If you like the video, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with more crypto related videos, and until the next one, I'll catch you next time.